welcome back to a beautiful day in the Pacific Northwest where it's not actually raining. My name is Lisa, this is Zipper, and we are growing on Vancouver Island. Today I'm going to show you all of the roses in our garden that are currently blooming. It's going to be a front yard, backyard, side yard kind of tour, so let's take a look. Behind me is the first rose we're going to look at. This is my double pink knockout rose. This is probably my favorite rose in the whole garden, and that is because it is super easy to look after. This was the first rose I ever bought when we purchased our house, and it is just my favorite rose. It is very disease resistant, by far the most disease resistant rose I've ever encountered. That being said, it has a tiny bit of black spot. But pretty much every rose in my garden has black spot right now because of the rain we get pretty much every single day this spring, which is a lot, even for the Pacific Northwest. But this rose is absolutely stunning. Just look at those petals. So gorgeous and so vibrant. Typically, it is very resistant to black spot and any other pests, including aphids. It doesn't often get anything like that. It's just a superstar, and it blooms usually from May all the way until about September, actually going into October sometimes. But this year has been a little bit strange, and it didn't start blooming until the beginning of June. So it's not the typical year, but still a beautiful rose, performing very well. Coming this way, we have my single pink knockout rose. I'll show you the blooms. I don't know if you can tell the difference, but it's a little bit more of a flat rose. The double has a lot more petals and is more full, but still a gorgeous rose. And I would say both of these roses have either no fragrance or very, very light fragrance. I don't have too many scented roses in my yard because I'm actually super allergic to fragrances. So that's one of the main reasons I try not to get too many fragrant flowers, although I do have some in my yard. But this is absolutely a gorgeous rose. Super easy to look after. And I don't think this one actually has black spot right now, which is amazing. And these are great flowers for bouquets and certainly produce an abundance of flowers. So they're a great one to have around if you like making bouquets or just having a very full looking rose bush. And here is my rose called Nicole. This is a florabunda rose, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I would describe this rose as being very delicate. It's just so beautiful. I love the pink and the white, how they blend together is just so lovely. And this rose's, I want to say it's its third or fourth season in my garden. My other roses that I already showed you are about 8 years old. So this one is still maturing, but definitely producing well this year. I'm going to show you this particular bloom is exceptionally vibrant. Zipper Noel getting himself a little worked up on the hill, and the supervisor has decided to join in for this part of the tour. And here we are right beside my rose called Snow Pavement. Now this is an intriguing rose. When I purchased it, it was advertised as being white. It looked exactly like the flowers look, except it was supposed to be white with a yellow center, just as it is. But let me tell you, I've had this rose for several years now, and it has never been white. Even when it fades, as you can see, it's still a pastel pink. There is nothing white about this rose. It's still beautiful. Kind of gives me wild rose vibes, but in a much larger flower form. Like the flowers and blossoms are much bigger than your typical wild rose, but it kind of gives the vibe of a wild rose. And this guy wants to participate in the tour by rolling around in the gravel and chin rubbing in the gravel, giving me more work for later. So here we have a rose that I like to call the chameleon rose. Every year it seems to come out as a different color since I bought it. And I don't know the name. I got this rose at a yard sale. And it is absolutely gorgeous. When I first got it, the flowers were blackish red, and then they sort of changed to a vibrant pink, and then some years it's this color, and some years I have all of the colors. So I'm not really sure what kind of rose it's supposed to be. I suspect it grows from the graft as well as the original flower that was grafted onto it. So I think it might be two varieties in one, if that's possible, or maybe even more. But it's gorgeous. I absolutely love it. It has a light fragrance right now, but sometimes at certain times of the day, it is very fragrant. Definitely a gorgeous rose that is a mystery. Not a rose, but blooming right beside my beautiful mystery rose is this gorgeous ornamental poppy. I cannot remember the name of this poppy, and this is the only one that's doing well. Most of the buds have rotted this summer from the rain, but I just had to show it to you before it succumbs to the rain or the wind. Coming up my gravel pathway, we've got a few roses at the top here. Here we have a absolutely pure white rose. This is the purest white I have ever seen in a rose. And this rose is called White Meiland. It's a tiny little bush, but I actually I made this rose myself from a cutting a few years ago. It's taken a while to grow, but it is so pretty. I have two White Meiland shrub roses in my front yard that I purchased several years ago when I created the rock garden. And this is just a duplicate that I made because I loved it so much. And it is looking absolutely gorgeous. There's a look at the flowers. It doesn't seem to have much fragrance, but it is absolutely perfection with its pure white beauty. And over here we have another rose. This rose was a cutting from my parents' garden that I planted just this past fall, like late fall. And I cannot believe how much it has grown literally since the fall. So I want to say like probably late October, beginning of November we planted this, and it is now June, but look how big it is. I'm going to say it's like almost 2 feet tall at least. And it has lots of flower buds on it. Like, take a look. This is either going to be a vibrant red rose or a dark red rose. I'm not sure. They have one of each in their yard. So we will find out what it is when it opens. But I'm super excited to have more red roses in my yard because I've had a hard time getting red roses. Every time I buy a red rose, frequently it ends up being pink. Here we are in my rock garden now, and this is one of my original White Meiland roses. just starting to bloom now. It's got lots of flower buds on it. It's going to be gorgeous when it opens up with the white alyssum beside it. Here is my cherry parfait rose, just with a couple blooms on it. There's one here, and I don't know if you can see. There's one way at the back. There's lots of buds on this bush. I just planted this rose last summer, like late last summer, almost fall. So I have seen the blooms before, but it only had a very small number of blooms last year. So I'm really looking forward to see how it fills in this year and what it looks like later in the season. And here is an absolutely gorgeous rose. This rose has pink and yellow flowers on the same bush, and I planted it last fall/summer. It's called In Your Eyes. It's absolutely gorgeous. So there's a yellow bloom. Very, very pretty, this rose. I think I actually prefer the yellow blooms to the pink ones, but they're both quite nice. And right above it, we have the only pale pink poppy that seeded itself in my front yard. Not 100% sure what this is, but it might be a peony poppy. I used to have those in my garden. And I think it's just the perfect spot to be growing right above this rose with its yellow and pink flowers. The colors go so well together. And here we have a landscape rose. I believe it's actually a ground cover rose. And the camera is not picking up the right color. It's actually kind of a hot fuchsia pink. And it's supposed to be a red rose, but I have noticed that often, I believe it's more pink in colder weather, and we've had such a cold spring that I'm not too surprised that it's not a more red tone. This rose is quite interesting because it usually blooms late summer, and it'll either get no flowers or almost no flowers in this time of year in June. So I'm a little surprised to see some flowers on it, but that's a nice surprise to have. Here is my Morden Sunset Rose. This is definitely one of my top favorite roses in the whole garden. Each flower really doesn't last that long compared to other rose varieties, but it is absolutely gorgeous. The colors are just out of this world. Again, it doesn't really have much fragrance, which is definitely good for me, being allergic to a lot of fragrances. But I just cannot get over how gorgeous this rose is. I just planted it last summer, and it is just full of blooms and buds this year. So I cannot complain. This tends to be a smaller rose, definitely on the shorter side. I want to say maybe 2 or 3 feet max. And I picked it specifically for that reason, for this location. I think it goes really well with the orange poppies and the prairie firegrass that I have growing beside it. And here is a mystery rose. This rose was a cutting from my parents' garden. And this one is a pale pink, sort of a pastel. It's very pretty. And I am absolutely shocked that it's blooming after just being planted in October, November. Absolutely gorgeous, this flower. And a lot more buds to come. So that was definitely a nice cutting to plant. And here's a look at another one of my white Meiland roses, and this bloom is fully open. It is absolutely gorgeous. here we have my Happy Trails rainbow rose. This is a ground cover trailing rose, and I believe it was just new last year. You can hardly see it with my rock roses that have taken over. I'm probably gonna actually trim back the rock roses a little bit, but you can see it amongst them. Here's a few blooms. And a few more blooms up here. This is the rose, and beside it is the rock rose. And it is absolutely gorgeous. I just planted this last year, around the same time as I planted the other ones in late summer. And it was a pretty immature plant, but it is just full of blooms and buds. I am so excited. I actually didn't know it was blooming until I started filming and I went looking for my roses. This is just so pretty. I am so happy with this rose. Once again, there is no fragrance, but absolutely stunning. So that concludes today's rose garden tour. Things are just starting to get exciting in the rose garden. I have only shown you a small portion of all of the roses I have. There's some that have not yet come close to opening up. So I'm definitely looking forward to showing you all of them when they actually do start blooming. So stay tuned for some more exciting rose garden tours and updates. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Have a good day.